Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. I am Susan Weinstein. I'm co-executive director at Families for Depression Awareness, and I'm very pleased that we are able to speak today with Rose. Rose, I wonder if you could introduce yourself a little bit, who you're a caregiver to, that kind of stuff.
Okay. My name is Rose Tenelia Dunn. I live here in beautiful Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I personally am a depression. I've had depression for a number of years. I'm a depression survivor, I want to say. And I am right now supporting my 29-year-old son who suffers from debilitating anxiety and depression. It's been going on for a number of years, maybe four and a half years. He lives in San Diego, California. So it's a double-edged sword, dealing with depression and anxiety from long distance. In some ways it's harder, in other ways it's easier. So I guess that's what we're going to be discussing.
Sounds good. Well, if you're going to stay in the continental US, that's about as far as you can get.
Oh, yeah.
So well done there.
Yeah, exactly.
And so physical distance is a challenge. For caregivers, we know that it's hard to live with someone for whom you're caregiving, but at least there you have eyes on them. You can monitor them a lot more readily. What is it that you look for, or how do you know when your son needs support?
Well, I guess I would start with saying that communication is key. Well, healing doesn't happen in isolation. So as his family, as his mom, we are in constant communication. We do have, as a family, we have a weekly call set up on Zoom with his dad, who lives in Oregon, his brother who lives in the Bay Area, and I. His dad and I are no longer together, but we are co-parenting through this. We are, as a family, we're pretty tight. So I think we have so communication is key, and we have some routines that we've put in place. So this once a week that we have this scheduled call, and it generally starts out with just some amiable chit chat, but then we open it to space where he can just share whatever's been on his heart this week. His depression and anxiety is exacerbated by self-medicating. So he does drink, and anyone who knows anything about alcohol is a depressant, so it doesn't really help. But it does alleviate takes the edge off for a while. And so there's a struggle with that. And our calls, some weeks it's easier than others. I think when it's your child or someone that you're close to, that you're caregiving for, you kind of intuitively can pick up through body language, through tone of voice, through eye contact or lack of eye contact, if they're struggling or not. And the calls kind of give us a bird's eye view as to what's going on at the time. And with the frequency of once a week, it seems like we're pretty hands-on. I do also text him. I subscribe to this meditation app called calm.com, and they send you a little meme every morning. And so I am a little bit of a helicopter mom. I send him memes that he can reply to, or he doesn't have to. It's more just letting him know that I'm thinking about him. And he may find them helpful, he may not. I've had to let go of being attached to whether he does find them helpful or whether he even acknowledges them or not. I'm doing it, I think, because intuitively I feel like this would be helpful, until he tells me not to, which he may. He's a 29-year-old testosterone driven male. So,
How were you able to set up the call and have everyone agree to do it and make it a commitment? I mean, there are a lot of people who
mhm.
have um, difficulties communicating with their loved ones. And there may be times when people are shutting them out or whatever.
Mm.
But if they were wanting to create that kind of space where there was this regular kind of hello and check-in, do you have any suggestions for how that might happen?
So in our case, his depression and anxiety has caused him to leave his job. So we are financially helping him out. Um, and part of financially helping him is we put together a contract there that there were certain things that we felt were in his best interests to certain activities that would be good for him to do, that would be helpful for him to maintain his sense of an equilibrium for his depression. And going back to the fact that healing doesn't happen in isolation, designing the contract around that. So one of the things was this weekly call. Now he's, quite frankly, he's been really good about reaching out when he's feeling poorly. He has said that it helps him to know that he's not in it alone, even if he doesn't want you to, even if he doesn't want to have a phone call with you, even if he doesn't want to actually speak with you, just a text that can say briefly, I'm struggling today. It helps for us to know that. So I think that was part of the buy-in. Um, the financial thing, we were like, okay, these are the things we're going to reward you for: a call once a week. We're going to reward you for any support group that you reach out to, any he's been through a couple of different outreach programs. If you call with those people, if what you're working on um, towards new employment. So we've, working out every day, meditating every day. We've actually pretty detailed given him a contract that, so he can kind of earn his keep as opposed to us just giving him cash. So he feels like he's working towards something. So that seemed to work.
Was there any negotiation with him on the contract, or was it just that you all thought of these things and
No, there was not a negotiation. We kind of set out his dad and his brother and I kind of put this thing together, and then in true to form, Greg just rejected the stuff that he wasn't interested in. So he's never earned any money around those things, and eventually they've just fallen off the table.
well, that, I mean, so it wasn't do all of this or you get nothing. So that's
Right.
that's
Yeah.
that's the negotiation in itself, basically.
Yeah. No, we were kind of like, okay, these are things. Your stipend is X amount a month. These are different ways that you could get to that stipend. And so if he did everything, we put a cap on it. We were like, okay, the max you're getting is this. But in order to get there, there's all these different ways to get there. And he really has been very appreciative um, about our love and support. I mean, he does actually say, I so appreciate your love and support through this whole thing. Now, he's been unemployed since last January, so it's been going on a while. And prior to that, he was actually, I think he had a whole year of taking several leaves of absence. His work was very good. They really helped him as long as they could. But his his mental status was that he just really couldn't show up on a daily basis. And as an employer, at some point you have to just kind of cut the cord. So it's a lot. It's a lot to be a caregiver for someone who's really struggling. And there's waves of I'm getting emotional here. There's waves of we ride the waves when he's riding the waves. Let's just put it that way.
How did you come around to deciding to provide financial support? What was that process like?
Um, I don't think we thought it was going to go on as long as it has. Um, so a year ago in January, he was really struggling with, I mean, making it to work at all. And it seemed like the job itself um, was a great source of stress and causing, which exacerbated his anxiety. And he would actually drive to work in the morning and not be able to go into the through the doors, and he'd be sobbing the whole way there. Um, so we, as a family, just basically made the decision, quit the job then, quit the job then, and we'll see what happens. And then as things as things happen, we there was an inpatient program um, that we were able to find, that we found out about, and up in the San Juans, and that's Washington State. And the timing just worked that he went there for 28 days. And then when he came back out, he stayed with his dad for a short amount of time, but the stress of being a 29-year-old living with your parent wasn't helping. And he wanted to go back to San Diego, where he had friends, and where he'd gone to college and lived there. I think he's lived there for about 7 years now. So he had community there. And as a family, we just were like, okay, this sounds, we're trying to hold him capable, I guess. And even though he isn't capable financially right now, we're trying to hold that space for him that he will be. And he's a fortunate young man in that we're all in a space that we can help him.
How were you able to find this program for him?
Actually, so through a friend of mine had actually attended the program. That she had some depression and anxiety issues as well, and was self-medicating. She was drinking like a bottle of wine a day, and she put herself through this program. And she had been talking to me for probably more than a year about getting him in there. And Greg was very reticent about wanting to go to a inpatient program. I think he'd heard a lot of horror stories about what they could be. And um, this place is absolutely lovely. It's on a farm on an island, and very small cohort. There were 10 of them in 28 days together. So we did a lot of vetting. Certainly Greg was probably the hardest to convince of the family. I was on board pretty much right away. My ex-husband was not, because of the cost of it, but and then my younger son, Greg's brother, he was really kind of taking his brother's side. Well, we can't force him to do that. And no, we couldn't force him to do that. But it had just kind of got to the point where he tried an outpatient program with minimal success. It just seemed like he needed more help. He needed more healing than we could give him in fits and starts. And the program there is quite incredible. It's called The Clearing. And I mean, it's healthy food, healthy environment. There's animals that they get to interact with. There's all kinds of different healings, and they provide, it's called spiritual psychology. They really try to get to the core issues of what's causing your depression, and help you to learn to talk about it instead of pushing it down. And for a 29-year-old male who is brought up in our paradigm of not talking about your feelings and just tough it out, and guys aren't supposed to have feelings. And he was someone that said to me for years, I'm very emotional, as you can probably see, because there's little tears pouring down my face. But as I'm talking, um, he would say to me, "I don't want to see your tears." You know, he had no tolerance for emotion. Well, it's because he was stuffing all of his. And what we've come to realize, or what I've come to realize, is that, and he has admitted to, his self-talk is pretty nasty inside. And so when he's pushing back and being caustic on the outside, that's a sign to me that, oh, when he starts being abusive to me, he's really struggling, because the voices in his head are so loud that now they're squishing out to the people that love him most, right? And I think that's part of the caregiver thing too, is that you generally are the one of the people who love this person the most, and yet you you're abused because of it.
You're going to take the brunt of it.
You do. You do. And it's so one of the things I've learned through this process is how important self-care is. And as a caregiver, there's this whole story that we tell ourselves about not being selfish and just giving and giving and giving till we have nothing left to give. And that kind of goes back to the old airplane. You got to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help somebody else. But it's really, really true when you're caring for somebody who is depressed, because they can suck you in like nobody's business. And if you're highly sensitive, you're riding the waves with them.
So talk about what it is that you did while you were in the throes of this in order to take care of yourself, and then you can talk more generally about your self-care as well.
Um, well, I think it's important to have support. So, and that whatever that support looks like for you, if you have a large extended family, I don't have that. I do have some very close friends who are probably tired of listening to me about my son. After a while, it's like eonsville. Like, what else is new? This has been going on forever. So you can exhaust people that way. I think it's good to have some kind of therapy. And for me, I actually have a spiritual counselor, someone who I can talk to about how I'm being affected. That I meet with on Zoom now monthly, and some kind of a support group, other moms and dads, if that's who it is, or if you're caring for a parent, or other people who are in a similar situation with you. Again, I want to say it again, healing does not happen in isolation. So as a caregiver, you're healing at the same time your loved one is healing, because depression affects the entire family, and it affects the entire circle of this person. It affects every friend that he has. It affects everybody. So I would say self-care really has to do with finding some kind of support for yourself. It also has to do with doing your own work. I mean, one of the things I discovered on this journey with Greg is that I am extremely codependent, and which means that I am willing to do whatever it takes for somebody to like me. And in the case of my son, it means I'm willing to lie down and let him walk on me in order for him to love me. We all have our own stuff that we need to be working on. And I think in working our own stuff, as we heal the relationship, it changes the dynamics of the relationship, and it helps him heal as a byproduct, right? We're changing the relationship. It takes two people If you continue in the same manner, you're going to continue forever. I can change it or he can change it. So I'm doing my own work at the same time that he's doing his work, and things are different. I have much stricter boundaries now.
I actually think that was very brave of you because anytime you shift what you're doing, you're taking the risk that he's not going to accept that shift.
Oh,
And,
yeah. I was
and
petrified.
okay,
I was absolutely petrified. Yes, for years. And again, my friend who recommended me to go to the clearing, she is my sister from another mister. Um, she said, she's the one who said to me, "You're extremely codependent." I didn't know what that meant. And it took about a year, and she, until one day she was, I finally looked it up, and I called her and I was like, "What?" Because once I heard what codependency was, I realized that that was integral to my perpetuating this situation with Greg, and that I didn't never called him on his bad behavior, which allowed it to continue. And then, unbeknownst to me, he would actually feel bad about what he was doing to me, but I was allowing it. So it was perpetuating this negative talk in his head and shame and all the stuff around how he treats his mother, but I was allowing it. Now I'm not allowing it anymore.
so for people who are listening and they don't understand what it means to set a boundary, can you talk about how? I mean, I think you just said one is that you won't allow him to treat you like that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was actually I can tell you a story for where like it really hit me. I had gone out to see him over Thanksgiving. So this is a year ago, Thanksgiving. And his depression was such that he has extreme anxiety to get on a plane. So my partner and I went out to see him for Thanksgiving. His brother drove down drove down from the Bay Area to be with him for Thanksgiving, and he was intolerable the entire time. And um, I left there, and I was like, I needed space. That was the line in the sand. It was the line in the sand. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I mean, it wasn't cheap for me to fly out there. It wasn't, I cooked a huge dinner for him and all of his friends, and he was just horrible, just absolutely horrible. And so when I got back, I was like, I just need space. So taking that space for about 2 weeks, I waited for him to come to me, which is really, really hard to do, especially if you're codependent. And I think in any of these situations, I mean, as a caregiver for somebody who's depressed, your biggest fear is that they're going to harm themselves, right? But I was so bruised and beaten that I actually put on my oxygen mask. And I was coming back from a meeting in Boston. Oh, no, feel the emotion coming up. I was coming back from a meeting in Boston, and the phone rang, and it was him. And generally, I would pull over to the side of the road and just take the call because, of course, I want to talk to him. He's my son. But what happened was I had this just downloading of I don't even want to talk to him. I was like, whoa, I don't want to talk to my kid. And I haven't talked to him in 2 weeks, and I don't want to talk to him. I came home and I sat down and I texted him. And actually, it was funny because I was just reading through old text today, deleting stuff, and I came across it. And it was basically like, I just basically said to him, I told him what his behavior, how it had made me feel. I would never have told him how much he hurt me in the past. I think we need, as caregivers, we need to hold our loved ones capable of good behavior because they are. And I think by sharing what is intolerable to us, by letting them know what is intolerable to us, it helps them navigate. They can't really see us because they're so deep in their own misery. So it's up to us to take care of ourselves. And I know he loves me, but I set up a situation where, yes, I will always love him unconditionally, but I don't need to be abused. And I had set that situation in motion many, many years ago. The first time doing it, saying it, was, I didn't know if he was ever going to talk to me again. I mean, because that's my biggest fear, is somebody who's codependent, right? I might lose my child. But what I got back from him was, thank you for telling me this. The voice, that's the first time I think he told me that the voices in his head are much more negative to him than anything he could ever say to me. And so it just ekes out. He hears this negative, 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 negative all the time. And so when he speaks, it just comes out and it feels normal to him. By setting a boundary, I'm telling him, this is not normal. It's not normal for you to treat me like this. It's not normal for you to treat yourself like this.
So what has happened since?
Well, I'm braver and braver, so that's a good thing, right? And our communication has gotten much better. He still has moments where he's toxic, I would say toxic. But now I know that his toxicity is when he's really struggling. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't drawn a boundary. I don't know. Am I slow on the uptake? Sometimes I feel like I am.
I think we all are clouded by our own experience and our own fears and our own hopes, and to see what they're seeing.
Well, I do say that I do believe that people are in our lives for a reason. And I think that Greg and I think he's my biggest teacher. He's taught me to value myself. At 62, that's pretty cool.
That is absolutely, it's a good thing to learn whenever it happens.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. And I think, I hope I'm modeling something for him. I'm showing him what it looks like to take care of myself. So yeah, so he has a model for it. Maybe he never had it before.
Interesting. So if you hear him doing that kind of aggressive talk or abusive talk or negative talk, how do you now raise it with your son as a concern about him?
So that's one of the things actually he learned from the clearing too, was there's two things: the negative talk, and then there's also like he'll just go silent. Like I can be texting him, sending him these memes or whatever. I send him stuff to the point I'm sure he's like, Mom, shut up. But I send him articles that I come across. I have a bunch of different things that come into my inbox, different websites and stuff, and I send him stuff all the time. I'm much more open about my own depression too. I think that when the kids were little, I basically hid that from them. I mean, they knew that I was medicated and stuff, but they didn't really understand what was going on. And now I'm very out front with it. And when he's struggling, I'm like, okay, these are things that work for me. They may not work for you. Everybody's toolbox is different, but there's lots of tools in the toolbox. What works one day may not work another day. What works for one person might not work for another person. But just put all those tools out there. One of the things that he had said when he came out of the clearing was, when I go silent is when I need you to reach out. So he knew that about himself, that he isolates when it's bad. So when he gets, when I don't hear back from a text, a couple days, I mean, I don't hear from him. If he misses a call or family call or something, then we know that things are not good. One of the things that I've stopped doing is saying, I'm sorry. If he says, I'm struggling today, I would always be, oh, I'm so sorry. And now I'm like, are you using your tools? And that was a direct result from the clearing. He said that, I don't want you telling me what to do. I know that I have the tools. Don't always use them. Remind me that I have them, because sometimes I forget, right? Sometimes when you're in the midst of it, you feel like you're drowning. But the life preserver is right next to you, but you can't see it because it's in the swirl, it's in the chaos. Remind you.
So there are people who have not been on like this long journey and may not have had depression themselves. I don't want them to think that their loved one necessarily needs to go to an inpatient program. They might need to, they might be in that position, but they might not. Presumably, you can acquire these tools and skills in other ways.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I think educating yourself, I mean, there's a million books, there's a million apps, there's Calm and Headspace, and there's all kinds of stuff out there now for people that suffer from depression and anxiety. Obviously, you guys, there's lots of free resources that really, depression and anxiety, it feels like it has come out of the closet in the last couple of decades. More and more people are feeling stressed out and anxious, especially with all the COVID stuff that's going on. My work is in climate. There's a lot of climate grief going on. Google's your friend. There's lots of stuff out there.
Well, and also for the people with depression as opposed to the caregivers, I mean, they can learn things in therapy. They can learn things from peers at support groups. They can also do their Googling. They can, go attend webinars and all that kind of thing. But you're absolutely right that there's so many resources out there. It's just a matter of having the motivation to go and look, and then also having the discernment to be able to assess what's credible and what isn't.
Well, and having the motivation is, when you said that, I think that's a big thing for people that are depressed. I mean, sometimes it's just, you can't get out of bed. But when everything's online, not like it is nowadays, I mean, you can actually have a support group. You can attend a support group sitting in your bed. The biggest, I don't want to say the biggest thing. One of the things that I remind Greg of is when he's really struggling, is to move the energy, and that can be getting out for a walk, getting out in nature, going to work out, whatever. If you're sitting still, it just hits you in waves and waves and waves. If you move through it, get out of bed and take a shower. Sometimes that can change your whole day. Put on some music and dance. Sometimes that can you're just moving whatever's stuck inside you, as a caregiver and as someone who's depressed.
It can be a production, but if you can get it together to cook,
Oh,
or the
yeah.
people in your household, and, present that different side of yourself. And it's showing that you care. It's getting outside of yourself a little bit. And I think that that's another kind of thing, so that people don't have to think about, going to do exercise, or, choosing the right music or whatever. It's just,
Yeah.
whatever's something different for you that allows you to flex some different muscles.
Well, I think creativity, anything that's creative, which cooking is. I mean, for me, I'm a big gardener too. Just being outside, color, and I mean, you don't have to be an expert in any of this stuff. We don't have to be perfect. And I think maybe that's part of this. For I know that is part of Greg's struggle, is the need to feel like he's doing things perfectly. Like, we're a lot of people who suffer from depression. I'm making this about me now. We're overthinkers. Like, we want it to look a certain way. None of us are experts. None of us are experts. And anybody who is an expert, when they started out, they weren't. So
Another thing that runs through a lot of people with depression is a need to be perfectionist, and I think that that creates a whole nother um, set of stresses on yourself. So that's another thing that I think people need to be mindful of. What is it that you want people who are listening to this to walk away with? What are the lessons that you would like for them to learn, or what are the messages that you would like them to hear from you?
I think first and foremost, recognize that depression is affecting the entire family. If you have a loved one, they're in the center, but everyone in their circle is being affected. Um, recognize that and acknowledge it, and give and honor yourself for what you are doing right. I had a coach who once said, count, don't discount. Count the things that you are doing to the best of your ability, and let go of the things that you didn't accomplish or that you could have done better had you known more. Um, educate yourself. Educate yourself about what depression is. And it does affect everybody a little bit differently. Um, so the more you learn about it, the more you'll understand, and the more you'll be able to see your loved one in their imperfection, through your own lens of imperfection, right? Um, let go of the responsibility that you feel that you can solve it for them. That's a huge one. Um, uh, that's kind of where I said I go back to. I don't say I'm sorry when he tells me that he's struggling anymore. I say I change it to, like, oh, that's a bummer. Um, are you using your tools? What have you done for yourself today? How can you make that different? That's holding him capable, and it's taking the onus off of me, because it's not, ultimately, I can't solve it for him. I can support him, but he has to do the heavy lifting himself. And I think if we do too much, which, again, codependency queen, there's a learned helplessness. Mom's going to solve it for me. Dad's going to dad's going to pay the bills. My brother's going to send me food. I mean, it's like, it's this learned helplessness. So you can sit back and just wallow in it. The only way to I don't know if you ever solve depression. The only way to get through depression is to go through it. You can't avoid it. And as a caregiver, by taking full responsibility away from that person, you're not doing them any favors. You're really not. And then I think realize that healing is not a straight line. I mean, we think like, okay, here's the problem, here's the solution. I'm going to go from A to B. Well, in my life, it goes do 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 do. I mean, it doesn't go in a straight line. So it's some days it feels like there's 2 steps forward, and then the next day there's 2 steps back. Count, don't discount. Just keep taking those steps forward. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Got to keep a little energy for yourself. Keep a lot of energy for yourself so that you can support them for as long as possible, and just hold that space for them. Hold space for them to be capable, because they are.
I think one of the hardest things, you had mentioned uh, something about uh, Greg needing to be ready to accept treatment or, deal with his
Mhm.
depression.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the hardest things for caregivers is to um, sort of see the answer and not be able to get the person to go toward it, or to wait until they're ready. You have any suggestions for people around
Mhm.
that?
Um, patience is patience is a lifetime lesson, right? Um, I think you just have to be honest with yourself, and as honest with the person you love about what their situation is doing to them and to you. One of the things that they talked to at the clearing, to talk to the cohorts at the clearing about, was how their depression was affecting their families. Um, Again, your loved one might not be able to see that or be able to admit that. So if you can bring that into the equation, do it for you, but do it for everybody that's in your circle. We all love you. We need you to take care of yourself. We want to see you healthy, but you have to do it. The night before Greg was going into the clearing, he had driven up from California, and I met him in Seattle to take him up to. We had to get on a ferry, and it was a lovely day out there. But I'm sure the entire time he was not looking at the beautiful scenery around him. He was freaking out that he was going to a 28-day program. And the night before, he was really angry with me, and he was like, "This isn't normal. Normal people don't go to a 28-day program," and blah, blah, blah. And I just looked at him, and I was like, "Well, is it normal to not be able to go to work every day? Is it normal to not be able to get out of bed because you're so despondent? Which normal do you want to live? Know that you're not alone. Get help. Talk to other moms and dads who've walked it with you, who are still walking it. You're not alone. Depression is a huge problem, a huge problem. There are so many people that are affected. And I don't know if I said this live or not, if I said this before. Our stories are our greatest medicine. If you are feeling this and you talk about it, you're going to open the floodgates for other people who are holding it in their heart too. And you're going to find people that live right next door that have walked it with you. Don't walk it alone. You don't have to walk it alone.
Rose, you're incredibly generous, and I've loved talking with you. And
it's a journey.
It's a journey, and we will catch up again soon.
Okay. Best of luck. Love to all of you.